Are websites headed for another inflection point? Will sites be obsolete in the future? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Whole Idea Podcast by DCG1. I'm your host and moderator, Greg Oberst, with a roundtable full of website experts here to help us answer these and many other pressing questions about the future of websites. Our panel includes Matt Trenier, Associate Creative Director at DCG1 and a leader of our in-house Skunkworks AI think tank. Kristen Crandall, Director of Analytics at DCG1, also a member of our Skunkworks crew. And Kevin Boldwan, Programmer and Lead Website Developer at DCG1. Okay, panel, yes, there are a number of forces lining up for what could be radical change in the way we design, develop, and use websites in the not-so-distant future. We're seeing some of that happen now. Kevin, let's start with you. What is this inflection point we're approaching?
The way I think about it is the internet, remember, was born before the web. So there was an internet, the DARPA folks and all of those kinds of things going way back in time into the 80s. By the 90s, the first inflection point, in my opinion, was what we call today the World Wide Web, browsers, graphical interfaces, not text-based. That obviously ushered in a revolution for marketing and branding and other things like that.
Sure.
I would suggest that the second inflection point was mobile. So the introduction of the iPhone in 2007 changed the way we as designers and developers build websites and the way that consumers interact with websites, what they do on their phones. And then I would say that we are just now at the beginning of the third inflection point, and that is the introduction of AI. And I believe that how people interact with online content is changing. We're at the very beginning of it, but it is changing because of AI. And so those of us who are building websites and designing websites and helping companies and brands figure out what their online presence is and needs to be, need to understand that we are not where we were 18 months ago.
Yeah, it's changing that fast.
Correct.
Kristen, I've heard it said that centralized and decentralized data control will not only determine the future of websites, but society itself. Not to get heavy, but do you agree with that assessment?
I don't, actually. I think that that's probably a little bit too apocalyptic, a little bit, for how it's happening. So I think just like at the beginning of the internet, there'll be a little bit of Wild West for a while, where the little guys might have a chance to show up in results in a way that they haven't before. But I think eventually, instead of, just Google or Meta being the big central big brother, there's just going to be one of the AIs that rises to the top and becomes that too. And so in that way, I don't think it will change that much. I do think just in terms of data in general and not being website specific, we'll probably move toward leaning into more decentralized data sources, simply because we're going to have to keep things secure. And just because there are so many different ways to get data, I don't know if it's going to continue to make sense to have it in one easy, efficient place anymore.
So decentralized being you and me being able to control our own
Exactly.
content.
And I think in the short term, we're going to see a little bit more decentralization, which is fun for an analyst, by the way. But I think it'll all just get back into the centralized format we're more familiar with today.
Okay, then, Matt, web design of the future, how will it be affected by AI and data, be it centralized or decentralized?
Yeah, that is a very deep question. I think probably one of the most significant things that's changing right before our eyes is that your website is no longer just going to be exclusively used by humans. There's going to be AI tools that are also going to be accessing what's on your site. So I think designers are going to have to think a little bit differently about presentation and the experience that they deliver, because in a lot of cases, I think people are going to be getting information from your site, but they never get there. They're getting it directly from a chat experience. So the kind of traditional ways that humans usually navigate, where they would go to the site, they would then search around on the site and look for the information that they want. Well, that's going to be changing to queries that happen within an AI search tool. You're also seeing the emergence of natural language search, where people will come to your site and instead of trying to navigate, through the navigation tabs that everyone's used to and understand, they can go to that search box and say, this is specifically what I want, and an AI tool can bring that response back. So I think you're going to have a little bit different workflows than maybe what we've had. I think what's not going to change is it's still going to be, the winning sites are going to have really high quality, relevant content. That's always been true, and I think it's going to continue to be true. But the way that information gets used and accessed, it's going through kind of a revolution right now, where the way that people are finding things is changing. I think in a lot of ways for the better. Rather than thinking of search being this experience where Google's crawled the entire internet and then it serves up a bunch of locations where you can go to. What's changing is now you can just get answers, which is much more efficient and in a lot of ways a better user experience. So I think designers are going to be challenged moving into the future. Like, how do we embrace this? How do we maximize that experience for people? How do we make sure that the sites that we build are just as accessible to AI tools as they are to humans, so that we can kind of deliver on the promise of that and everybody can have a better user experience and easier, quicker access to the things they're looking for.
You mentioned search, GEO, yet another initialism in our ever-growing pile of initialisms and acronyms. GEO is Generative Engine Optimization, and it's giving marketers some angst. Kristen, let's address that. What is it?
At its simplest, it's just optimizing your site so that you'll show up in an AI-generated result. It's the first thing you're going to see when you type something into your search engine, and you want the content from your website to show up in that. And so that's very simply what it is. To piggyback on what Matt was just saying, though, that I think is really great, is that content really, really matters for GEO in a way that it doesn't for SEO. So I'm a little bit of like an SEO naysayer anyway, so I should say that up front. I would not be sad to not have to deal with SEO in all of our web analytics. But SEO is like, you have to have some like cheesy, buzzy keywords to make sure that Google sees it.
Right.
And they might not actually like match the voice of your brand. But for GEO, or just to show up at all in a generated result, it's about actual usable content so that the searcher can get their answer immediately. And so right now, at least, AI rewards good content in a way that SEO didn't.
I find that I'm laughing a little bit at that because I too am an SEO naysayer, but I've always just been saying the same thing. You build it and they will come, right? You build the good content, you have it semantic in your HTML, and you have good copy and good content on your site, and eventually the search engines will find it, and the people who are playing the games and stuffing in the keywords. Don't forget, on the SEO side, Google has an financial incentive to ensure that none of those work, because they want to sell you ads, right? And Google can't sell you an ad if you can get the same thing, meaning a good search engine result, for free, right, by playing the games. So I trust that Google is going to win that game, that we are never going to be able to win that game. When it comes to GEO, I would say the same thing. Keep with the good content. Keep with what you're going. But I also want to kind of riff on what Matt was saying about how I think we have to be careful about lumping all websites into this discussion, because, I mean, there are plenty of websites that don't, by design, have answers. And the whole notion of content for AI being able to answer questions, in my mind, only applies to a certain subset of websites out there. I would say that, a high-end whiskey brand, there would be no expectations that they would show up as an answer in AI content. At least that's how I would pitch to them, because to me, their website is more about their branding. And I don't envision AI results, or at least I haven't seen AI results that are providing like specific, which whiskey should I drink? And then saying you should get this brand of whiskey. That's what they might be able to answer, the difference between a rye and a bourbon, or, whatever it is. And if you have that kind of content on your site, that's really great for this kind of thing. But it also, you just have to be careful about where you are putting your focus in terms of having that content, or maybe it's not relevant to you.
Although, counterpoint to that, your high-end whiskey brand could relatively easily just throw an FAQ page at the end of their site that has some facts about like the differences between rye and whatever other kinds of whiskey there are. And then suddenly that brand is showing up and maybe getting people
That's
interested.
a great point. Good point.
I think this conversation really exposes that, content creators are going to be challenged with like, how do they think about content? Because I think that if you kind of have to get in that framework of like, how does this answer a question rather than, because I guess, 3 for 3, we're all skeptics about SEO and that, it's from the very beginning, it's been this sort of system that can be gamed and there's a whole industry around trying to do that. And I think with GEO, it's going to be a lot more challenging. You're going to have to know your customer really well. You're going to have to understand what they want to know rather than just, like you said, stuffing a bunch of keywords into a site and hoping that they land at your destination. Another thing I think is kind of an interesting opportunity that I think a lot of people are going to innovate around is like, how do you turn your brand into answers? How does that fulfill the kinds of searches that people are doing? So it's also early days on this. So I think we're going to see a lot of innovation and a lot of exciting new opportunities, but it's all getting built right in front of us. You talked about 18 months. I'd change that to weeks. The rate of pace or the pace of change is so fast that whole business models are arising and collapsing like within 6 months. It's the Wild West, like you said, Kristen.
Yeah.
So I don't have to rush out and rewrite my website necessarily right now, as long as I feel good about the content that's in there. But it sounds like to me that it's something that marketers can be really hopeful about in terms of their content on their website, being able to address the more nuanced question now, thanks to GEO, and getting results that look deeper into sites and find the way that rye is whiskey is produced in a unique sort of way over their competitor. It might find that now, whereas it may be challenged through traditional SEO.
Yeah, that's a really great point because to answer your question, if you were building a website that was working well for SEO, because you were following the rules of writing good content, you will succeed in GEO. Is my understanding, at least, of how GEO is working. But it's new, so we're all learning kind of along the way. But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't have an opportunity now to enhance your website with some of that stuff that in the past we may have kind of thought of as ancillary content. It's not just the buy now button, it's other things. And so now you have an opportunity to tell more stories, to get that branding in a more emotional and in a more emotional way that could appeal to people's, things that they're looking for beyond just how much does it cost. Slop.
Well, that brings up another issue, internet slop, which I was saving till later in terms of safeguards for the internet. Let's put that aside for a second. I want to just follow up on this point about gatekeeping and generative engines now more like the front door into a website.
Way I would look at it is, to use your doors analogy, there are a lot more doors. Where it used to be all about getting the viewer to your site to be able to get your content, and now it's going to be able to surface in a lot of other ways. In fact, if you think about like the way agents might be deployed, there can be scenarios where the agent uses your content that the user never even sees to make decisions, to make recommendations. So that idea that there's just going to be a lot more access points, I think that's definitely going to be the future. That it's just going to continue to grow. And I think that there's, for marketers who embrace this and get really good at telling their story and really understanding their customer, I think it's going to be a huge advantage. You talk about slop, which I think you could kind of translate into mediocrity. I think that if you're playing in that mass middle in terms of like rankings and the kinds of connections people are making, I think you're just going to further fall behind. And brands that do a great job of this, they're going to be able to take advantage of all these new doors as ways to get people into their content and interacting with their brand. Again, the tools just keep changing so quickly. I think there's going to be dynamically generated content will be a part of this story as this evolves. Where sites will be able to respond to who's visiting and and create an experience that's unique to them. I think it's still really early days on that. There's kind of some unproven technologies out there that are being developed, but I think that will increasingly be the baseline where people are having this more personalized experience.
And I just want to add to that, like, I think there's people that are like some of our clients that are starting to panic a little bit because they see so much less traffic to their website. And so, like, you can see paid search costs are going way, way up because everybody's trying to fill in that gap with paid search, which isn't going to work because they're getting their information from AI anyway. But I think it's a better view of it than, oh my gosh, nobody's coming to my website anymore. How do I resolve it? Well, you can't, because people are going to get a lot of answers they weren't getting before from their AI agent. So the website has to evolve to that, but also you have to understand that people are going to be exposed to your brand without you tracking it through website visits. And there's still a lot of gaps in how you can track people that are getting referred via an AI engine, but I'm sure that those will get filled in like that. So right now it's a blind spot, but eventually it won't be.
From that analytics perspective, Kirsten, what do you think will have to change? I mean, because I think people will still want to measure how things are performing.
Exactly.
And a lot of them are measured by how they perform.
Yeah. I mean, you'll just have to be able to attribute back to those AI engines. And you're starting to be able to a little, like, you can see a traffic referral source. And if you look at that, it might show you like ChatGPT. It just doesn't show that all the time. So you're probably undercounting how much traffic is coming from an AI engine right now, but that'll get better over time. And then there's also less granularity right now. So you can't see things like what geography you're showing up in a particular AI generated search result. But I have to believe that over time they'll resolve that too. And we'll be able to attribute that the same way we would to a paid ad or an organic listing showing up.
Right. And I think another interesting point is that we have been living in this monolith of Google for quite a while now. And the AI results, some people are using Copilot, some people are using ChatGPT, some people are using Perplexity. There are enough real players out there that it's going to be important to try for us as an agency to hopefully get our clients not to freak out, right?
Yes.
And to help them understand that things are changing. We don't have a silver bullet at the moment that can fix all their problems, because the world has changed from not just the monolith of Google, but the idea of search engine result pages, right? Just aren't a thing that are as valid as they used to be. And you compound that with the fact that the balkanization of where those agents are living right now, there's no big player. And so, or there's no one player, I guess is a better way to put it. Any kind of solutions that are going to come up in how we do reporting and how we do traffic analytics and all of those kinds of things, something may work for ChatGPT traffic, but it may not work for Perplexity traffic. And so it's going to take a while for that to shake out in terms of being able to get that reporting, get that understanding.
Now, Kristen, did I understand you to say that you are now seeing results even in these early days of generative engine search, website traffic falling off?
Absolutely.
Already?
Yes, especially from sites that rely heavily on organic search traffic. That organic search traffic is dropping on some of our sites by as much as like 25%. And that's not because of bad SEO. That's just because that's not how people are getting their information anymore.
So that's just websites. But so does that speak to the need for better digital presence, more awareness of that just can't be about my website in terms of my branding effort?
Yes and no. So yes, your brand needs to be out there in all of the social whatevers, and you need your influencers, and it's really, really important that you have a good mixed digital strategy to make sure you're out there. However, websites don't play a less critical role than they have in the past, and it's just that they're playing their role differently. So I think you really do want to make sure that you're showing up in those results. And the only way you're going to do that is with really, really good web content. So it's hard to reconcile that when you see less traffic on your site. But I really, really would like recommend to all of our clients, like, don't put less energy into making sure the site is really, really good, because it actually does matter, even though you're maybe seeing less traffic come through.
As a writer, I like hearing that.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of a yes and situation. To reiterate your point, it's just as important. It may be getting more and more important. It's just that there are all these other channels that you have to take into consideration, because AI search favors things that it considers to be credible. So like if you have information that's being presented consistently across multiple platforms, that's going to be more likely to be pulled by an AI search as an answer. So I guess it's more thinking holistically about like what is the whole marketing universe. And I think brands can't afford to kind of ignore any of these channels because it's the aggregate that gives them the advantage. So it's sort of like things like Reddit, for example, have kind of risen in value as a place to put content, in part because it's one of the places that's still open to all these different AI, LLMs that are out there. So all of a sudden you need to be thinking about, well, how does Reddit fit into my strategy? And other content sources like that as well. So it's going to create more work, I think, for folks, but generative content will help to fill that gap. So I think it's yes and more.
Yeah, a little more work, but also a little more help too, with tools that help you present your content like you've never been able to present it before, and perhaps be more effective in that result.
Right. I did want to just chime in that as important as the content is, the presentation still is important as well. And you still have to have a good-looking website. You haven't been able to be a company for 20 years without having a website. You still have to have that. It still has to be good. It has to be usable by everyone. It has to be fully accessible. It has to work well on all devices. You still have to do all of that. If the code behind all of that is handcrafted or it's done without, relying on AI vibe coding or anything like that, you're going to succeed better because the search engines and the GEOs are going to be able to find that content in a better way, and they're going to be able to present things like Kristen earlier mentioned, FAQs. If we can do some structured data and make it clear both to users and to the AI engines, then that's great, and you're really going to succeed. But you can't be a brand and just have a bunch of text on your website. As good as that content is, that's not good enough. You still have to. It still has to be there. There still has to be a real website out there.
We keep pointing the finger at AI as the catalyst for change on websites of the future, but it's not all about AI. There are other factors, changing consumer habits, people leaving brick and mortar and going to digital experiences. Expectations for personalized experiences are also driving change. So I just don't want to throw AI under the bus or elevate it. I'm not sure which is going on here, but
I think one issue to think about also is that we are now seeing the first generation of people who have grown up with the internet completely. People who were born in the late 90s are getting to the point of being real consumers now. And so I think there's a maturity. At least I hope that people aren't, if they want to get a shower fixture, I assume they're not Googling Home Depot. They're going to homedepot.com or at least if they do Google Home Depot, then they're clicking on the first link and it's taking them to Home Depot if they think of Google as the internet.
Yeah, I think to your point, Greg, AI is a tool. It's a means of doing things rather than destination on its own. And I feel like the things that we build still have to be outstanding experiences for humans. If we build a flawless, technically correct system that is optimized for AI search, for example, and it just falls flat with people, then it will be a failure. So I think there's going to have to be that, I think there will be actually increasing demand for emotional connection and empathy, which isn't something that AI is necessarily super good at. So I feel like that's an area where human content creators are going to continue to have an important role, is to kind of create that human interface, I guess, to your brand and your content. So I think I mean, I'm pretty excited about where things might evolve into the future, at least as far as opportunities for people to do things they've never been able to do, like what's happening with AI video, where people with basically almost no resources are creating these things that are getting close to broadcast quality, and soon will be. So it's really empowering people to take their ideas and run with them. How that shakes out as a business, I think, is TBD. But especially in marketing, we're getting a direct benefit from the literally billions and billions of dollars that are being poured into these technologies by investors. And it's kind of a really exciting time, because as they fight it out for who's going to be the leaders, the costs are dropping, the accessibility is going up. So I think that for folks who embrace what these things can do, it's just going to be really interesting opportunities. And I'm excited to see what the people who've grown up with this, where, like you said, it's just normal, how they start running with it and making new things. It's going to be exciting and maybe a little bit scary as it rolls out.
What do we need to do to protect the integrity of content of websites and the online experience in the future, with so many tools available to, honestly, bad actors too, who are out there, doing their thing, will only feel perhaps more emboldened with AI.
There's a huge IP fight coming. It's inevitable. When ChatGPT or OpenAI released Sora 2, they tried kind of an old school trick that the industry's been using for a long time. Like, well, you'll have to tell us you're going to opt out. Or they rather quickly had to change that policy. And I think you're going to see deals getting done where the people who own these intellectual properties are going to work out licensing agreements, because I think it can be a situation where it's winners all around. But if the perception is just theft of these valuable assets, there's every incentive to go after these companies. So I think there will, the legal process is slower than the technology process, but I think there's going to be a shaking out where that will, I think, be part of what creates winning brands in these AI platforms, is who has these great content deals. I think that's going to emerge as time goes on.
The other part of that is I think that we can influence it more than we've ever been able to before, because we're part of training all of these AI models. And so, speaking of good content, if we're good stewards of our content, even in our literal day-to-day here in our offices, if we're really thoughtful about how we design our own website, for example, that has an impact on how the AI learns and judges content. So to me, every single person that's creating content is accountable to making sure it's good quality content. And if enough people take on that accountability, maybe that's more content than the bad actor content that's out there.
Kind of overwhelm them with,
Exactly.
I think one of the silver linings for me as a web developer who cares a lot about accessibility and performance, I think one of the real benefits of this is that for the first time that I can remember, we have had a really great arrow in our quiver to let clients know that content matters. And that if they're going to be spending money on a website and they say, we want all of this animation, we want video, we want all of this, but we only have this much budget, then maybe we can go and we can say, ChatGPT is text-based. And if you have really good content, and if you focus your dollars on doing that and getting a good writer and telling a story, that's where you're going to succeed, because the people who are coming to your website, or people might not be coming to your website at all. And if you can get your content out there through these text-based mediums, then I think that's a real great thing. And so maybe we might end up seeing fewer sites looking like Apple, for example, and where everything is, there's obviously always opportunity for that, and it depends on the brand. But if you're not Apple, well, then maybe you don't need all of that. And that may be a minority view. The designer in the room might be grimacing at that. But for me, performance and accessibility are just as important. And if we have the opportunity to say, if you focus on those with really good content, you're going to succeed in this world, as opposed to some big, let's say a 3D island of content that is on your website that people, ooh, it looks really cool, but that's not really helpful in this day and age anymore.
That's a great point. Accessibility could be one of the great innovations of future websites. Accessibility in the context of the ADA, for example.
Yeah, I think that being able to do things like voice navigation on a site, being able to have dynamic content that's created for people maybe who have disabilities or special needs. The reader experience, I think, can be improved through some of these technologies. So I do think there's going to be improvements that make it easier for all sorts of people to be able to get what they need to off of websites. As we had talked about a little bit earlier with that mobile inflection point, that was one of the first times where you saw a really big shift in how sites were designed, with responsive design to be able to work well in any platform. And I could see things like around accessibility improving in a similar way. Folks who have vision issues or they have hearing problems, I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting ways to present information to those people that gives them a richer experience.
I'm hearing a lot of upsides about the websites of the future.
I did have one thing I want to throw out there about AI slop, because slop is not new. There's always been this the path is self-optimization and we just look at the numbers and that's how we win. And I think that's only half the story. I think if you don't have quality, if you don't make that human connection, then you fall into that range of mediocrity and become forgettable. So I think it's somewhat self-correcting, because I think it's going to deliver diminishing returns over time because the noise will just get louder and louder. So if you don't have something that breaks you out of the pack, you're just going to disappear. So quality wins, I think, is one of the takeaways from this conversation.
Yeah, and I would suggest that if quality has always won, hopefully, we're in a little bit of a unique place, or a new place anyway, where quality plus content wins in a way that it hasn't in the past. Now we have I don't know if opportunity or a curse is the right word, but we have to be there now with the content as well. The quality, the word quality can't just describe what it looks like. It has to describe what it actually says in a way that has never needed to really be that way in the past.
I think this kind of brings it full circle back into that centralized versus decentralized conversation, because right now, in a slightly more decentralized world than we're used to, you see some of that garbage rising to the top, especially not just in an AI search results, but if you're in an actual, speaking with an actual AI and getting weird responses or dated responses, there's garbage in there for sure. But I think, like I mentioned at the top, as it moves back into a little bit more of a centralized place, as the quality AI rises to the top, then that good content winning piece starts to happen too. And we start to trust those with at least the same level of trust we give our Google search results, which again, there's a lot of trash out there and there's always going to be a lot of trash out there, but we'll develop some level of trust once things settle down a little bit.
Well, is it safe to assume that the search engines of the future will do what they did to keyword stuffing? Those algorithms will get dialed in a little bit more for the websites of the future to reward better content and recognize slop.
Yeah,
exactly.
And we really aren't saying anything that we haven't been saying for 20 years.
It's true.
Right? It really is good content, well presented, performant, accessible. If you weren't doing a website like that in 1999, you were doing it wrong then too.
True.
And if or in 2007, when people started looking at your website on a phone, or today when you're getting AI results. So if you have those things, you're doing it right. And the way it's consumed by AI is new, and that's different. And the way consumers consume, whether it's ChatGPT or AI mode in Google or whatever it is, it all just still boils down to those same things. Good content, performance sites, semantically presented so that those automated bots or whatever that are scraping the site can find what you want them to find. maybe it isn't as much of a revolution. It's still an inflection point for sure because it's how people are interacting with it. But the rules about what make a good website, in my opinion, just haven't ever changed.
Plus, they're measurable.
Yeah,
yes.
Right.
We've been measuring them for 20 years, and we'll keep measuring them for 20 more, just
That's
pulling
right.
in the AI piece now.
So this fear that some people might be feeling about the future of websites, I don't want to say it's not genuine, but it's probably more about the unknown in terms of what it's going to look like and how it's going to function.
Yeah, and soon we'll be able to collect the right AI data to prove that out. It's very close.
You can't wait, I can tell you.
Well, I think to a point that Kevin had made earlier too, like, the last 20 years, all these patterns have emerged that we all understand how to use, and I don't think those are going away. They're just being supplemented and enhanced by these other opportunities. I don't see like a total revolution in shopping carts. They were figured out, they're probably going to be similar in the future as they are today. But how the person found the product that they put in the cart, that might be a little bit different experience. And there might be different channels that, become more important that, are emerging as all of this develops.
If you're a marketer, why wouldn't you be excited about the future of the new tools that you have emerging? There are some concerns, but there's also a huge upside, it sounds to me. Agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah. I feel like any big technology change like this always has, there's the destruction side of it, and then there's all this new stuff that emerges that creates a whole bunch of new opportunities.
Just a dash of healthy skepticism.
Yes.
Mostly
Sure.
positive.
The hype machine,
Yeah,
got to
it is
take that
real.
into account for sure.
Well, we should question definitely the motives, and we should question to the extent that we need to understand how do we apply it in a way that makes sense for what we do and for our clients, even after we're dialed in and approaching our next inflection point. So I wonder what that's going to look like.
Brain implants.
No.
Oh, my goodness.
Don't stop using your human comprehension skills.
For sure.
Let's get through this first one first. Panel, why don't we workshop some key takeaways for this episode in real time?
Absolutely.
Let me look at my notes here. Okay, 1, websites and the internet are reaching another inflection point, yes, but that's okay. We've been here before. We'll be fine.
Correct.
2, while traffic may taper a bit, websites will not become obsolete in the face of AI agents acting as your front door, but it's likely they will be more important than ever when those and other doors open.
Yes.
Absolutely.
3, website design, UX, development, and content will certainly evolve as the pathways of the customer journeys get rerouted, but in the end, good content wins, as always.
It's true.
Right.
And 4, something you can think about now or in the near future, enhance your site with content that answers the questions people have about your product or service in greater detail. Focus more on rich and revealing sentences and content and not so much on keywords. Does all of that work?
Yes.
Yes.
Agreed.
Good?
Completely.
Kristen Crandall, Kevin Boldwan, Matt Trenier, great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have questions for our panelists about your website of the future, feel free to drop us a line at podcast@dcg1.com. Thanks very much for listening to the Whole Idea Podcast. Our producer is Kelsey Brewer. I'm Greg Oberst. Stay tuned to this channel for more insight and inspiration for Whole Idea marketing. Take care.